Good morning, everyone. As we are about to embark upon the learning of the Ramban's famous words in the Iggeres HaRamban, his beautiful letter which he wrote to his son, it behooves us to have a small biographical sketch of who exactly the Ramban was. As the more that we understand the greatness of this scholar and his loftiness and elevated soul, the more we will be able to appreciate that every word that he writes inside of this Iggeres, this letter, is not just his opinion or his feeling or his viewpoint of the matter that he's discussing, but rather it's coming with the power of Kol Torah Kula, which means all of the Torah is behind him when he says the words that he says. In order just to understand the Ramban a little bit, I'd like to describe his life. We'll do the best that we can in a few minutes. Firstly, the Ramban, his name is Rav Moshe ben Nachman, and that's the acronym Ramban. The R is for Rabbi, the M is for Moshe, the B or the Beis is for Ben, and the N at the end is for Nachman. That's how he became the Ramban. He's also known in English as Nachmanides. Now, he was born in the country of Spain, in a city called Gerona, in the year 1195. So we're talking about a man who lived over 800 years ago in the world. He studied under some of the most well-known and greatest sages of all time, some of them who were members of the Bali Tosfos, which if you look inside of a Talmud, a page of Gemara, on one side is the commentary of Rashi, on the other side is the commentary of Tosfos. Some of the Ramban's teachers were the authors of that great work called Tosfos. So he was already living in the earlier generations, which are called the Rishonim, the earlier commentators, and he learned from the greatest minds of that time. Now, besides becoming the great mind that he was and the great Torah scholar that he was, he had a burning desire to put his thoughts down on paper. And at the young age of 16, he began his first penmanship of his masterful literary works on Shas, on the Talmud, on the Chumash that he writes, his commentaries we'll see later, and many, many different topics and subjects, which he writes each one in tremendous clarity and depth. One of his main missions in life was that when he would find later commentators that would argue upon the earlier writings of the Gaonim, which means period of people who lived before the Rishonim, which means going back 1,000, if not years before that, that bothered the Ramban very much that later generations would argue outright on their works. And therefore, he made it his business to write svarim, to write books, which were in defense of the words of the earlier generations, in order to show that everything that they said was verifiable and could go straight back to Har Sinai, to Mount Sinai when the Torah was given. And this was one book, one sefer after another, which he wrote, again with his tremendous elucidation and wisdom and chachma and insight and total clarity and absolute control and knowledge of the Torah. So besides writing a commentary on Talmud, and besides writing a commentary on the Rif, who is one of the classical commentators on the Talmud, and all of the other beautiful svarim which he wrote to defend the Masorah, the transmission of the Torah, he is very well known for the commentary which he wrote on the Chumash. Unlike Rashi, who comes along to explain to us the simple explanations of every verse that he comments on, the Ramban, his commentary is lengthier, and he often will go into great explanation of the deeper meanings and the concepts that are there in the Torah, and he comes on to, in certain places, deep mystical concepts in Kabbalah, which, unless you're a Kabbalist, are very difficult to understand. But the Ramban, who was well versed in the world of Kabbalah, of mysticism, felt that it was important to write these words as well. And therefore, over the last 800 years, the holy words of the Ramban in the Chumash is something that is studied every day, every week, every year by thousands and thousands of Jews, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions across the world, because it is the eye-opening Perush commentary on the Chumash. Now, all of that being said, as the Ramban lived somewhat peacefully in the country of Spain, in the year of 1263, so this is already, the Ramban at this point is about 68 years old, King James of Aragon, who was one of the main kings at that time in Spain, who was very close to the Ramban. As a matter of fact, it's brought down in certain sources that this King James actually became a disciple in his learning from the Ramban and understood many things based upon the Ramban's teachings. So there was a Jewish apostate that was living in the kingdom of Aragon at the time, and he ordered the Ramban to argue and to dispute this Jewish apostate. And the Ramban ended up coming to the king and his court, and there were many dignitaries from the church that were there at this time as well, and the Ramban destroyed the arguments of this Jewish apostate, and he was clearly, after 4 days of refutation and debating, the king declared the Ramban as the winner of this debate because he was so convincing and had answers to every single question and everything that there was, again, based upon his tremendous amount of knowledge. Now, the Ramban wrote all of his ideas from the debate in something called the Sefer HaVikuach, which is the book of the arguments that took place. And he wrote word for word basically what he had said over, but the church was very upset with this because they felt that he blasphemized Christianity. So under great pressure, the Ramban was forced to leave Spain after all these years, and he traveled to his lifelong dream of living in Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. He arrived when he was 72 years old. You have to imagine an elderly man traveling, not in an El Al plane, not in a big steamship and a yacht and a boat, not in a car, rather by foot, by ship, by horse, by wagon, by donkey. He traveled long and arduous and hard to get there, but he eventually arrived in the month of Elul at the age of 72. He settled down in the city of Akko, which was a port city, and he lived for the next 3 years of his life. He was the main Rav and the Rosh Yeshiva of the yeshiva in Akko, and at the age of 75, he passed away. He left over tremendous amount of literature, of writings, of deep mystical secrets of the Torah, and his desire to always defend the authenticity of the Torah is something that stands until this very day. So let us just understand that when we begin to learn tomorrow the words of the Ramban in the letter that he wrote to his son, we're not talking about a regular, simple person off the street. We are talking about a man that lived over 800 years ago, who had all of the Torah on his fingertips, the revealed and the hidden aspects of the Torah. He knew it inside and out, and his mind and his heart and his soul was all the purity and the holiness and sanctity of the Torah. That being said, let's keep that in mind as we read through the words and we learn together what he writes to his son, because he is giving us what's called the Hashkafas HaTorah, the proper outlook on life, the way that the Torah wants us to look at it. So, Im Yetz Hashem, tomorrow we will begin the deep, beautiful letter that he writes in such an emotional and meaningful way to his son, which his son was the benefactor, and all of Klal Yisrael becomes the benefactors of the holy words that are inscribed for all of life from the Ramban. From everybody here at Makor Chaim, wishing you a wonderful day. We look forward to beginning the Iggeres Ramban, the letter of the Ramban, tomorrow.